So excess histamine can be a major problem for people, and chances are if you are watching today's video, then your loved one is at your wit's end when it comes to suffering with histamine intolerance or MCAS. You're probably already familiar with so many of the common symptoms, right? Like hives and allergies and headaches and migraines and gastrointestinal issues. So in today's video, I want to spend some time talking about some of the strategies that will help you clear out histamine from your body, stop a histamine reaction once it gets going, control a histamine reaction, and lastly, what you need to do in order to prevent future episodes and flares. Well, hey there, I'm Dr. Hagmeyer, and I work with patients who have histamine and mast cell activation syndrome every day. And I want to share with you some of the things that I share with them when they have a flare and when those flares rear their ugly head. Now, one of the things I want you to know is there are really 6 steps that you can take to help clear and lower your elevated levels of histamine rather quickly. Now, I want to be 100% transparent in the sense that avoiding histamine is not possible. Even if it was possible, it really wouldn't be good for you, as histamine really is essential to life. You need histamine for stomach acid, you need histamine for your immune system, histamine is needed in your brain. And so while eliminating and avoiding histamine might seem like your #1 goal, like it's your public enemy #1, it's not, and it's not even possible, nor would it be good for you. But we do need to have a rescue plan in place to help our body clear out this excess histamine when we are dealing with a histamine flare. And so that's what we're going to get into in today's video. Now, if you're not familiar with the histamine bucket is really an analogy of all the things that fill up, or the root causes that contribute and fill up this bucket that contribute to your symptoms. In life, these can be many things that fill up the histamine bucket. Some of these things might be like our genetics, histamine genetics for DAO and H and MT. It might be our diet. It might be hormones like estrogen, testosterone. It might be stress and cortisol levels. It might be gut health. It might be methylation pathways. It may be mold. It may be some of the medications that we're taking or took. So all of these things potentially fill up our bucket. And once we reach a threshold, one little extra drop in that bucket, it's already filled to the brim, is what fires up those histamine symptoms. So again, the goal is to make room in that bucket, or clear out some of the things in that histamine bucket, so that we have room for the unavoidable, the histamine that's just a natural part of daily life. Now, keep in mind that there's no one thing filling up your histamine bucket. We're all different. And histamine intolerance is really a multifactorial condition, because there's many different causes, there's many different triggers from person to person to person. And that's again why each of us have our own bucket that we need to be concentrating on and working. Okay, so let's jump into some of the best and fastest ways to clear histamine from your body when you're having a flare-up. And obviously, let's start with the thing that's #1, and that is identifying high histamine foods. Really, that's the first step in managing histamine levels whenever you're having a flare-up. Sometimes you have to identify, you have to go back and really review some of the foods that you may have come in contact with that may have been filling up your bucket. Many foods contain histamine, while other foods contain histamine-releasing substances, and these are known as histamine liberators, and you need to be familiar with these. Be aware of foods that are high in histamine, right? These are the classic culprits for causing histamine reactions, which are going to be things like aged and fermented foods, right? So just as a quick reminder, these are things like cheese, kombucha, pickled foods, processed meats, shellfish, nuts, chocolate. Again, these are all high in histamine. But with this said, histamine really is surprisingly high in a number of fresh and healthy foods as well. Things like spinach and tomatoes, right? But for this reason, I've created a free guide called your Quick Start Guide to Histamine Intolerance. If you visit my website, you can download that guide, you can print it up, you can read it a few times, and when you have a flare, go back to it and see what you may have come in contact with. Now again, I'll leave that information in the description part of this video, as well as some other articles and links that you may want to read. For example, how to start a low histamine diet, part 1, where it goes through all the foods to avoid when following a low histamine diet. So that would be something that you want to look into. All right, so step 2, really following a low histamine diet. So again, eliminating foods, that's the easy part. But now what are we supposed to eat in its place? Again, if you download that free guide that I just mentioned, that I put together, there's a part 1 and a part 2. Each one of them outline different foods you should avoid and different foods you should eat, right? So download part 1 and part 2. Now, here again, this is where you're going to learn about not only the best foods and vegetables to eat, but the best proteins, the best fats, the best herbs, etc. Now, one word of caution is that when it comes to leftovers, unless you like spending time in the kitchen, you need to wrap your mind around the problematic impact of leftovers, right? Histamine levels tend to increase as food ages. So the longer we leave that food in the refrigerator, the higher the histamine content can be. Freezing, of course, can help reduce the histamine content in some foods, but then just be aware that certain foods, as you begin to thaw them and reheat them, they can now become liberators. So again, choose fresh foods when you can over leftovers. So that's one way, or really two ways, to clear histamine and really lower that histamine that's in your bucket. Step 3 is consider histamine blocking supplements, right? So if you're not already taking these, you should be at least familiar with some of them. There are several supplements that can be quite effective for some people who struggle with histamine intolerance and mast cell activation syndrome. But a few supplements that have been shown to really not only help clear histamine, but stabilize your mast cells are going to be things like quercetin, stinging nettle, DAO, maritime pine, vitamin C, again look for palmitate kind of vitamin C, fish oil, perilla extract, serrapeptase, and then probiotics like Lactobacillus plantarum and Lactobacillus rhamnosus GG. Again, these can all be very effective at clearing out excess histamine and stabilizing your mast cells. Step 4, histamine intolerance is exacerbated by poor gut health, right? Within our gut, these mast cells are strategically located in several key areas. Now, these mast cells can be triggered by hormones, they can be triggered by medications, they can be triggered by injury to the mucosal lining. Food allergies can trigger them, food sensitivities, parasites, and mold or mold allergies. Your gut bacteria play an essential role in supporting an overall healthy inflammatory response. And again, people with gastrointestinal disorders such as inflammatory bowel disease or Crohn's or leaky gut or small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, they may have reduced DAO activity and increased histamine levels due to the injury of the gut lining. This is again why, if you have histamine intolerance, why the gut health really needs to be a major area of investigation and testing. The more you know about your gut, the more you can focus in on it. Now, if you know what's triggering, obviously, these gut issues, again, this is going to be a major area for clearing out histamine from the body. Okay, so step 5 really has to do with managing stress. Really, stress can come from physical stress, it can come from emotional stress, it can come from trauma. Again, all these things can flare up histamine intolerance, right? Stress triggers the release of certain hormones in our body, things like cortisol and things like adrenaline. And in turn, these can basically stimulate mast cells in the body, which again, release all this histamine. So again, increased histamine release can lead to symptoms such as hives, digestive issues, and again, all the different kinds of discomfort mentally, physically in our bodies. Stress can also contribute to a leaky gut or leaky gut syndrome, right? This is a condition where the lining of the intestines becomes more permeable, more porous. It allows larger molecules, including undigested food proteins and histamine, to then enter into the bloodstream. When histamine levels are in the bloodstream, when those begin to rise, that can basically stimulate that histamine flare-up or those histamine intolerance symptoms. Again, stress can slow down digestion. It can reduce the production of stomach acid, which again is necessary for breaking down these histamine-rich foods, which are again often high in protein. Now, think about it like this. Incomplete digestion often results in higher levels of histamine in the digestive tract, leading to symptoms like the bloating and the diarrhea and the abdominal cramps. One of the most effective ways at combating stress is by implementing various herbal medications that can influence and affect and dampen down your cortisol levels. If you think this is one of the major areas of your histamine bucket, I want you to watch the video that I did that explains the relationship between stress, specifically the stress hormone called cortisol, and how it influences mast cells to cause the release. With that being said, high cortisol levels can prevent histamine clearance. So that becomes an important area to focus in. Okay, step number 6 to clearing out histamine is research your medications, right? Some medications cause mast cells to release histamine. Some medications like H2 histamine blockers, if you take them for a long enough period of time, they can actually begin to interfere with DAO. DAO, again, is that enzyme that breaks down histamine in your gut. So I'll say that again, you heard me correctly. The very medication that you're taking to try to get control of your allergies and histamine symptoms can be the very reason why your histamine is not clearing from your body. H2 blockers can cause a problem with histamine intolerance, but so can birth control pills, so can excess estrogen, so can antidepressants. So again, those are just a few reminders of the medications that can do that. Okay, so just a few reminders for today's video on the 6 steps to clearing histamine from your body. Now, I realize at times it can seem like a never-ending battle, just a daunting battle that there's no end in sight. But the truth of the matter is that getting ahead of histamine can be a long road, but it doesn't mean that it can't happen. The key is to know how and what is filling up your specific bucket. Chances are there's more than high histamine foods in your diet that's filling up this bucket. But the strategies that I outlined in today's video should give you some direction and really focus or an area to focus in on when it comes to your health. Now, when it comes to MCS and histamine tolerance, the devil really is in the details. Now, I realize that high histamine levels can really lead to a lot of uncomfortable and sometimes debilitating symptoms. But with the right approach, you can manage these levels and you can get back to living a normal life again. Remember, everyone's body is unique, so it may take time to find that right combination of strategy that specifically works for you. The key here is going to be patience and persistence. Patience and persistence, again, are the key to successfully managing high histamine levels. Okay, and just as a final reminder, don't forget to check out the description box where I'm going to leave some additional resources for you to check out. And if you like this video, I think you're also going to like this video on histamine intolerance that I did as well.